repetition is the mother of skill. We've been hearing that all our lives, but is it really true, and does it apply to language learning? Well, the answer is absolutely yes. Repetition is the currency for language learning, and it drives the whole process. Now, one of the issues with repetition is that it's commonly seen as boring, and it certainly can be, especially if you try to repeat something on a row, or something that is already boring to begin with. And in fact, 99% of language learning is just about repeating stuff, either repeatedly exposing yourself to certain language patterns or vocab, or trying to actively produce them as an exercise over and over again. Now, this can come in many forms, but there's one type of repetition exercise that is very rarely recommended to new students, and whose incredible effectiveness is very rarely discussed. So in this video, I want to present this to you and encourage you to use it. But before we go ahead and explain that, it's really important to understand what types of repetition we can see in language learning. Repetition comes in two main flavors. The first one is random. That is running into some grammar, words, or expressions that you've been studying before as you pick up a new book or watch a new movie. This makes up a huge portion of our language learning, but you might not even realize it because it tends to happen in the background. You don't need to think, oh, I'm gonna remember that word. It just sort of happens, but it's kind of slow and quite unpredictable. And also, less common words that don't come up as often are very hard to acquire this way. And the other main flavor is, of course, not random, but planned. That is when we strategically target certain expressions, grammar, or words. And there are also two types of planned repetition. The main one you will be used to is when you focus on a certain pattern, maybe some verb tense you need to practice, or some sentence structure. You try to get exposed to them in what we call variable background. For example, reading different sentences that include the same word, or trying to conjugate certain words into a form that you're learning at the moment. About 90% of the language learning exercises that you can find in language materials or when you go to a class are pretty much this type. This can work very well, and I'm not telling you to stop doing it. But there is something about constantly changing everything else that inadvertently confuses the brain a little bit and doesn't let it get all the juice out of the examples you're reviewing. Which leads us to the alternative type of planned repetition, which is repeating the same thing. You can often see this with flashcards and spaced repetition systems, the ones you can see in Anki, where you get exposed to a question and try to answer it many times in specifically measured intervals until it is engraved in your memory. Now, this can work absolute wonders, and there is a ton of studies to back it up. And for that reason, the main product we develop in our webpage are flashcard decks, and we have them for these languages. But this is where this alternative crazy technique comes in. And of course, when I say crazy, I'm joking because this is absolutely obvious. But for some reason, we tend to not do that. And what I'm talking about is watching the same stuff over and over again. The same stuff. I'm talking the same movie, the same song, the same comic, or the same 10-minute video on YouTube. Just enjoying it over and over again without feeling like you're not doing anything. If you think about it, this is something we all used to do as children. We wanted to hear that same bedtime story or watch our favorite movie again and again. Now, we didn't want to do it on a row, usually, but we did like to do it from time to time until we maybe had watched it for 15 times or something like that. And let me tell you, this technique is absolute language learning gold. And there are a few reasons for that. The first one is it's super simple. It couldn't be simpler. You already know how to watch it. All you need to do is do it again. Read that chapter again. Watch that video again. Reread that poem. You don't need to find any new material or figure out what to do with it. Just go through it again. The second reason is that it's enjoyable. So your brain is going to be having fun, which is the perfect state for learning. If it's something you like, your brain is going to be emotionally stimulated and invested in the story, which makes it very easy to get over the language barrier. And then especially when you combine text and images, there's a ton of details that help you understand what's going on, so that your brain doesn't have to do all the heavy lifting and can focus on picking up the language and acquiring it. Additionally, every time you go through it, your brain gets better at understanding the content because it can build on the previous understanding it developed, so you become like an expert on the piece. And there is where the magic happens. Without you feeling like you're putting any effort, our brains start to seamlessly internalize the language in such a powerful way that is kind of better than everything else. And unfortunately, I didn't realize it until very, very late in my language learning journey. It was only really a few months ago when I was living in Taiwan, and almost every time that I would have a decently complex conversation with the locals in Mandarin, I would see the characters of this movie that I really, really love sort of speak through me in a way that felt like I really knew it somehow. But I had never really studied the movie like that. I just picked it up from watching it over and over again. And I had it at my disposal, which felt really, really empowering and really helped me get over the tongue twisting and brain freezing that we usually experience when we are in real conversations with real locals. By the way, if you haven't watched that movie, you have to give it a try. It's an absolute banger. But let's bring it back for a second. I'm not suggesting that you need to do this all the time. Only do it when you want to. I'm not suggesting that this is the only type of repetition that you need to focus on. This is not an or game, this is an and game. So you want to keep doing all the stuff that you did before. But if you have found some piece of content like this that you really love going through, please don't feel like going through it once again is a waste of time, like you're learning nothing new. You want to expand your vocabulary and learn new things, but you also want to develop depth. And this is, in my opinion, pretty much the best way to do that. This is probably the most powerful way to develop that level of automatism that you feel when you speak your own mother tongue into a new language. And it may push your language skills to the next level. Hope you keep enjoying your learning, and I'll see you on the next one.